Good evening and welcome. This time it's not quite the Cover One Buffalo podcast. We're going to be talking about something a little bit different today. And we were joking pre-show. We've had a myriad of mock draft shows and things like that. But for anyone who was following me on Twitter, saw that I was doing a Marvel marathon, and I somehow had avoided. I started out working nights at one point when they were being released and didn't see a lot of the initial ones, and then just never got into it. And part of it was if I hadn't seen the early ones, I didn't want to be confused later on. And somehow 12 years later, I hadn't seen Marvel movies. So I started out 23 days ago watching one Marvel movie every single night and watched all of them, including the Spider-Man Far From Home last night, and went through the entire journey. And I brought on three self-professed Marvel experts and fanatics who have been giving me support through the journey. First, some of you may have heard him before on Cleveland Internet Radio. Rich Haynes. Rich, how we doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Really happy to be on and talking about something outside of sports, something different for one.
And many listening will be familiar with co-founder of the Bills Mafia and the head honcho over at 26shirts.com, Del Reid. Del, how we doing?
Excelsior. I'm excited for this podcast.
That's awesome. And one more self-professed Marvel expert and his compadre, Ryan Jr., former Jags, Bills, current Toronto Argonauts defensive end, Ryan Davis. Ryan, how we doing, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, this should be a lot of fun. Real quick before we dive in, I got a little quick question for you guys in how we are just kind of operating in this new world. So each of you are in kind of different pockets of the industry and community. So Rich, I know you were already working kind of one of the newfangled split roles where you were on site some days, off site some days. So I would think this would be a little less of a shift for you, but how has it been working fully from home and remotely?
Yeah, it's certainly different. I'm in the logistics industry, for my main profession, and working from home. I was doing about 2 days a week for the last year and a half. Prior to that, I was in the office every day, and being able to kind of go, even if you're working from home, and go to lunch or go to the gym and work out. You could break up your day, wasn't a big deal. Finding myself at home 5 straight days a week, and with maybe take a run or whatever, around the neighborhood or whatever. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, so kind of in the same boat as Ryan over there. So, take my daughter outside or whatever and hang out for a little bit. But I mean, it just gets boring, man. It's just like, what, I don't know. It's the same thing. It's monotonous. But from a staff perspective, I had to move all my staff home. They were not working from home for the most part. So trying to get them kind of in a routine. And that was kind of the biggest thing for me, is to be supportive for them and just try to, get them all settled into their new normal.
And Del, I know you've put out some messages when you're in there as a one-man show in the the warehouse and getting things up and running for shirts going out. How is that working? I know you've tried to balance that with some of your staff and the folks helping you at 26 Shirts.
Yeah, it's tricky because we've had to, we started it before it was a mandate, but we basically sent everybody home to work from home once this whole situation started to get a little sketchy. And then our print shop actually closed down indefinitely, and so we had to scramble to find another one that was still operating, and we managed to locate that. But he's one of the few guys in Buffalo that's actually doing it. So because the mandate is like a business can have one employee, but that's it. So a lot of owners are kind of like doing all the work if they want to stay in operation. So we're working with a different print shop than normal, same great quality that we're used to getting with our normal vendor. And but it's really just like kind of stretched everything out. It's like the whole process. But our customers have been awesome. We've done our best to communicate, all the things that we're dealing with. They don't, our customers don't live in a bubble. They understand what's going on. And so it's been tricky, just in terms of managing that whole end of things. I'm really fallen in love with working from home. So that's going to be difficult to actually, maybe break myself from doing. But I guess when you run the show, you can kind of do that a little bit. But
yeah, there you go.
But it's been interesting. And then in terms of the work-life balance, I've actually kind of enjoyed it. I don't say it out loud in my house because I don't want to get in trouble. But I'm kind of at the other end of the journey than you guys. My daughters are 16 and 14. And so they've already become their own people. And dad's not the coolest guy in the house anymore, or the coolest guy in the city or whatever. So it's been great. This like basically forced bonding time. So I've really enjoyed the past month. I feel, it sucks that it's because of such a terrible reason in the world, but in my little microcosm, there's been some joy that's been able to find it, because just I've really felt like my relationships with my daughters have been a little bit through this. So that's good. But
That's
so
awesome.
yeah, there's a whole lot of different things going on in my life and everybody else's life, and but we're working through it, and there's benefits to be seen, and there's some drawbacks, but we're just we're managing it all.
Awesome. So Ryan, I know in a your world, your body is your business, and going through that, how are you working as far as staying aware of opportunities for any workouts or things like that, staying up to date with with your current team, and how are you keeping yourself motivated and having access to keeping yourself where you need to be?
Really, I've been bored, so I don't want. My wife works from home now because of everything. So for me to kind of stay out of her way, me and my son get out here and do drills, and he'll run 100 yards across the field, and I have to go chase him. So that'd be part of my conditioning as well. But for the most part, it's been cool. I like this extra time with my son. He's not in school because of everything. So, I like these moments right now that we're spending together, because I know when everything gets back up, he's going to be, him and his mom are going to be here, and I'm going to be in Toronto. So, I'm taking advantage of every single second, really, that I have here. And that's kind of been my story. I've just been working out and trying to do something to kind of keep my mind off things. So I need to go read a book or something. And I think that'll be fun.
No, that's a perfect segue for us. I mean, that's honestly exactly how this happened. I'm actually getting ready to move and getting our house ready. So during the day, I'm packing boxes, I'm getting stuff ready, getting ready to get into my new role and my new gig that I'm starting here in a week. And at night, I just didn't. There's no sports on. That was so much of what I watched before. So I'm like, all right, what am I going to get into? So as I dove into this, I decided, all right, I'm finally going to do it right. I'm going to start from the beginning. Some of it I had seen little clips of, some of the really popular ones, Iron Man and stuff like that you can't miss on TNT and things like that. So I found snippets where I was like, oh, all right, I think I saw that scene before, and I watched a half hour of this. But then I'd say 19 or 20 out of the 23 movies, I just had never seen any of them, and was going through, and I genuinely got to experience it the first time all the way through. And we'll start from there. And when I started this and I put out the list, and it's actually the background on Ryan's screen, I read a couple things about whether to watch it in the release order or in the chronological order of like when the movies would have happened in the real world. And obviously everyone else that was a huge fan just saw them in the release order and in what they happened. And there was a couple of things that we'll get into here in a second that I think made sense seeing them in chronological order. But I'll start with you, Del. You warned me not to. You warned me to do it in the release order. What was your thinking behind that, and what you thought would be valuable in seeing it in the release order?
Well, I'm a big fan of the normal time-space continuum, and these movies aren't made in isolation. So decisions are made in movies that came out in 2012, 13, 14, based on things that happened in the movies that came out in 2008, 9, 10. And I'm not just talking about like storyline stuff, but actually like the filmmakers' decisions and some of the reveals and everything that happened. Like, it's a lot cooler to see Nick Fury with 2 eyeballs in Captain Marvel, after you've seen him go through everything. And he says, like, last time I trusted somebody, I lost an eye. And so you wonder that for years, like, what was it? And they turn out it's the stupid Flurkin that scratched him. It's like such an anticlimactic moment.
Right.
But so, I mean, that's just my thing. Even like, not to get too nerdy, but like even like the Chronicles of Narnia, I love those books growing up. And I remember that was always said that you should read them in the specific order of the story, not the order they were released. But if anybody's ever read those books, they understand what I'm talking about. Like when you read The Magician's Nephew, which they say you're supposed to read first, you lose all the coolness of knowing that was actually the professor in that owned the house and the original wardrobe and everything that the kids went into. So there's that whole prequel thing is lost. And the argument can be made for the Star Wars movies as well too, when you watch the prequels before the original series, you know, Obi-Wan never told you what really happened to your father, loses all of the gravity, you know, if you already know that, oh, that's Luke's dad. Like, so I made sure that was one of my proudest moments, not to go off on a really quick segue, but one of my proudest moments as a father was keeping the secret from my children for, you know, 5 or 6 years until we watched through those movies. And when I remember when that reveal happened about, you know, Darth Vader to Luke, like my daughter goes, what? She was freaked. She was like, what? That's his dad? And I was like, yeah. And then my younger one says, why are they fighting? You know, it was like, so there's things like that in terms of like the cinematic movie experience. I think they get lost in terms of watching them in terms of the storyline order, but that's my own personal beef and, you know, my recommendation, but obviously you enjoyed the process. So it's not, you know, all for naught.
Ryan, did you have any thoughts when I was going through this that came up different in how I was noting it?
No, not really. I was a fan of the chronological order, but after hearing that, I could see why the cinematic order would. Yeah, I mean that releasing it the way they did, that was perfect because now you're able to go back and look and like, oh, okay, and you'll be able to see all these kind of Easter eggs and stuff like that. Even now, like when Black Widow releases, I think that's going to take place after Civil War. Mm-hmm. I'm anxious to see like, you know, what kind of happened with Budapest and all this kind of stuff. You know, I'm kind of anxious to see that now. So I can definitely get down with that. I like that.
So help me, they had better mention Budapest in that movie. I've wondered long enough. I am waiting to see what happened.
I'm ready to see you like what happened. I want to see her past. I want to clear this up with her. So I'm anxious to see that.
Rich, anything you think I might have missed or that would have been different or that I picked up on doing it in this order?
You know, and I think both Ryan and Del made really great comments. Obviously the biggest change is that you watched Captain Marvel second, and it was second last. So, you know, that's a huge change. And, you know, I don't know if that really impacted how you would have viewed it, honestly, too much.
That's a good example of the one, though, that like it set up who the Kree were. So like that was one of the things that, okay, now I saw that it did set up the younger Nick Fury and the younger agents and things like that, of kind of prefacing some of that. So it gave you know, the agent's death in the Avengers more gravity of kind of seeing that initial part and going through some of those different pieces of it. I could see some setup things that for other people were Easter eggs or already known, because when they happened there, it was like, oh, okay, that's why. Whereas for me, it was kind of setting it up in order.
It's kind of like two sides of the coin. It's like the opposite. You know, Del made really great points. You probably missed some of the kind of fun things. You know, the Nick Fury eyeball thing. Honestly, I wouldn't have thought about that. That's hilarious, and that's a great way to put it. But on your side, you're kind of seeing the setup of things, even like the Kree, you know, in Guardians of the Galaxy. You're kind of seeing the setup of that, you know, that race or whatever ahead of time and getting a little bit more background. So I think it's, you know, I think there's pros and cons to both ways of doing it. But hey, the most important part there, Greg, is you got through all 23.
Well,
so I've been trying to do for 2 years for you, but
there's a couple things I couldn't help. Like, obviously, I'd seen the poster of what Civil War was, and I knew that it was coming. So even like that little snippet that, okay, I know that exists, I couldn't help but notice some of the parts that they built in of, you know, Iron Man and Captain America kind of butting heads earlier on, that I'm like, oh, okay, they're starting to build up that tension. They're starting to build up those two dynamics of, you know, the principled approach of Captain America and the more pragmatic, whatever it takes approach for Iron Man, and how that would continue to escalate and build. And it was hard to know, okay, like if you didn't know that movie was coming, that would make the post credit scenes even more impactful and making that there. So I could definitely see some of that from your point, Del, of that I already knew some of those things. So seeing it in that order changed it a little bit. jumping into the next piece of it, I know we went through and Rich was doing actually some rankings as I was watching it, and people always chimed in with, oh, this is going to be your favorite one, or the opposite end of the spectrum. People be, all right, you probably could skip this one, but you push through and do it anyways. So we went through and actually even did some almost rankings of where we had some of our favorites. So we don't have to necessarily literally do all 23, but I want to do some of the highlights of that in starting at the bottom. I'm going to guess that kind of it was almost a side bit, and the fact that you switch from Norton to Ruffalo is Incredible Hulk at the bottom of almost everybody's rankings.
Yep, pretty much.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, good. I was hoping there would be a dissenting voice. Adele, stomp for Incredible Hulk.
Well, I'm a bit of an Ed Norton stan. I love him as an actor. When that movie came out, a Hulk movie had never been done right. And back then in 2008, when I saw it, I didn't know I was supposed to be waiting around until after the credits. So I missed the after credits of Iron Man. I missed the after credits of Incredible Hulk. So I didn't even realize about the whole, like, the initiative coming together for Avengers and everything. But I thought it was a really good story. I thought it's not Ruffalo, so I think that automatically counts against it in a lot of people's eyes. But I thought the story was well done. Hulk was portrayed on the big screen well, unlike the movie that came out 5 years prior that Ang Lee did, which was just so, I remember being so excited for that movie and being so disappointed in it. But I thought, that without that Hulk movie, so much of, Ruffalo's entrance in Avengers doesn't make sense. I mean, the character, Bruce Banner's entrance, doesn't make sense. Like, why is she hunting him down, here in South America, or wherever it was, India? And I don't know. I just thought it was a good story. I enjoyed it. Abomination is one of my favorite, bad guys, for no particular reason. I just always thought he was cool when I was growing up. So I enjoyed it, So I wouldn't say it's in my bottom 3, at least. I don't know. I think there's worse entries.
So Greg, I created my own category. So I have the tiers, right? So I have a Hall of Fame tier, Pro Bowl tier, solid starter tier, my bench depth, and then I actually created the Ryan Leaf tier where, he's still, the Hulk still made millions of dollars, but for me, it was a bust, man. Like, the story could have been cool. And actually the plot was, I agree with Del, the plot was needed for the special effects and I just felt it was just so B-level compared to the rest of the Marvel movies that, for me, it's down there in its category by itself in the Ryan Leaf tier for my 23.
Well, I think it's hard when you see so much of the rest of it. And heck, that was even my biggest struggle in we'll get to it, the Spider-Man Far From Home. They went so far the other direction with the special effects and the crazy, kind of Inception special effects inside the special effects, where that was the point of the movie, and they were able to do the projection and everything. It was overwhelming to try to keep track of and to watch what was going on the screen. It did seem like it was before they really hit their stride from a funding standpoint. It was noticeable. Now, obviously, it's different for me. I'm watching it, and it's literally night after night, so you're seeing it immediately side by side of the other movies. It was noticeable how much more, technology money they had available for the progression of the films as it went.
Yeah, and that was before Disney had bought Marvel. I think Universal, they actually still own the rights to the Hulk character, but Universal put that movie out. I think Paramount did the first Iron Man and maybe Iron Man 2. So there was a lot of different things going on. So it's amazing how Feige was able to actually kind of hold that together or use those building blocks to create the Infinity Saga. But I think for all things, they did a good job in terms of how they're able to continue that continuity.
And I'll throw out a couple others that I had lower in my experience. And again, I'm a little bit different in the sense that, my experience is obviously based on not reading the comics, not knowing the backstory. So some of the things, I'll get to in a minute. I liked some of the part of Iron Man 3 because I didn't have any buildup of who the villain was going to be and who the Mandarin was, or whether that was portrayed properly, or some of the different pieces like that, or not knowing, some of the other. I actually, I know some people wrote after my review on Spider-Man Homecoming that it was finally someone portraying that, hey, in the comic books, Spider-Man is a nerdy, immature teenager, not some 25-year-old pretending to be a teenager that you did in the other movies. I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. But it annoyed the crap out of me the entire movie. He was obnoxious and immature the whole movie.
He nailed
And
it.
everyone was like, no, that's the good part, that they finally fixed it. I thought the Thor 2, the Dark World one was okay. That one was lower for me. I thought Captain Marvel was pretty good, but I didn't have any,
you can be honest. It was okay.
Yeah, it was okay. I liked it had one of the better plot twists when all of a sudden you're like, oh, the green guys are the good guys. Oh, okay. That was a good one that it got me. The Ant-Man and Ant-Man and Wasp were different. Like Paul Rudd and Michael Pena are so funny. Like it was very different from the other movies, but it was still, they were so funny in the way that they did them that I thought even if maybe the overall movie wasn't as good or the bad guys weren't quite as scary as the other ones, they were still good movies. So I actually didn't have a ton of terrible ones. I had Incredible Hulk low. I had the Ant-Man and Wasp wasn't up to the standard of the other ones. The Thor Dark World was lower, but that was really all I had lower in there. And then a whole bunch in the middle of good to better.
For me, if I could real quickly defend Ant-Man and the Wasp, that was a great palate cleanser after watching Infinity War a few months prior.
Okay.
So after seeing Infinity War, that movie just ends so heavy, and then you get the credits. You're like, oh my gosh, now what?
Yeah.
Then to see, I really feel like, Marvel fans I needed a movie that actually had like the Partridge Family theme worked into it. That was, what I mean? I needed it. And of course, then at the end, they made sure they left you with, that post-credit scene. They made sure they left you with the pit in your stomach. But I really enjoy heist movies just in general, like the Ocean's 11 franchises. I'm a fan of that, So I really enjoy those kinds of movies. But I just thought that, and again, going back to release order, although this one kind of makes sense, I think in either direction, that tone was really needed for the MCU, in my opinion, after the heaviness of Infinity War.
Yeah.
And Rich brought that up when I finished it, that it was 1 a.m, I think, when I finished Infinity War, and I was ready to hit play on Endgame right then. And I'm like, all right, I can't go until 4 a.m. here.
Yeah.
But and I think your comment was, imagine now having to wait a year for the next one to come out.
Exactly.
After watching that. So, Rich, what were some of yours that you thought were just in that like steady starter category?
Yeah, so I have Ant-Man in there. I have Thor, Spider-Man: Homecoming, and for me, Captain Marvel. We're kind of all in that solid starter, kind of in the middle. That I like. I liked them, but for me, they were just kind of your kind of middle of the road. The Marvel movies. One I want to bring up though, and I want to get everyone's opinion, because I think I have this way lower than most people do. So for me, Captain America 1, I have as the 4th worst movie that I have for all 23. So I want to start with Ryan. Ryan, what was your opinion on Captain America, the first Avenger?
I think when I first initially saw it, it was okay. But like once the stories got deeper and we watched Avengers, and when I watched Infinity War, I went back and watched Captain America 1 and got a different appreciation of it, seeing Red Skull and seeing where he went after him and Captain America got into the fight with the Tesseract kind of banished him or sent him to Vormir. So when I finished Infinity War and got to go back and watch that, I had a different appreciation. I looked at it a little different, and but overall, I give that I probably would give that a solid starter or middle tier grade if I had to.
You actually bring up a good point. Like Red Skull, I absolutely hated Red Skull.
I thought it was
Captain
cheesy.
America 1. I thought he was so like all the rest of the villains. And obviously, you have to suspend disbelief. You're watching comic book movies, right? But I feel like everything else, I don't know. It just felt like it could be real somehow. And maybe it was just his makeup, or I don't know what. I just felt it was so cheesy. That's why, honestly, I have Hulk way at the bottom too. I just felt that the villains were just looked so cheesy to me that I don't know, I just didn't like it. But I do like Red Skull. Ryan, to your point, in Infinity War and in Endgame, I thought he did a good job, being the gatekeeper there.
And that was a good surprise from my
really
perspective.
was.
I had no concept that he was ever going to come back for any reason.
No, I didn't get no kind of inkling that he was going to be a part of it. I didn't even, that was awesome to see.
Yeah, I audibly gasped in the movie theater. I was like, oh! When he came in, I thought it was great.
And I'll ask about it, later on for like, individual moments that stuck out to us. But obviously some of the buildup for, there's obviously huge parts for everybody, but an awful lot of the core story goes around Iron Man and Captain America. So I think that that's also part of it, is that the story matters a ton. But I'll say, just from a standalone movie, I thought the first Iron Man is better than the first Captain America, even if they're both kind of pillars of what eventually happens. Just as a standalone movie, I enjoyed the Iron Man original more than the Captain America original.
Oh, yeah, no question.
For me, Iron Man 1 was the one that really was like, okay, oh shit, let's go. This is going to be sweet. Tony Stark's whole character, just the way they laid that out, the music, the soundtrack, everything for Iron Man 1 just was pretty badass in general. So, for me, I just thought that was such a big. So that's one of I have 5 Hall of Fame movies. I won't say the rest yet, but Iron Man 1 for me is in my top tier, my Hall of Fame category, if you will.
Well, and I know there's, a piece of that kind of weaves through the whole thing. I can't think of any exceptions where I didn't like it, but consistently the music and soundtracks were fantastic. Like the score was, serious with like normal, your standard movie type score in the moments that were there, but some of just like the fun inserts of some of the soundtrack and music that were there were awesome throughout the entire thing. So many where I was like, oh yeah, like it was just really well placed music throughout all of the movies.
Music tells such a big story, not to sound like some kind of cinephile. I'm not. I just love popcorn movies. But like the music plays such a huge part in these movies. It's like one of the characters almost. And I think it really sets the tone for, what's going on in the story that's being told in that specific movie. You look at the Guardians of the Galaxy.
So the Guardians of the Galaxy 2 are the two of them are by far the best examples.
Oh yeah. But then also, like I just mentioned a few minutes ago with like Ant-Man and the Wasp, like having Come On Get Happy after the movie they just showed us 2 months prior, I think was huge, and there's probably a bunch of different other examples that I can go with, but just even the cinematic scores are just, they're so great. Like if you called me on my phone right now, you'd hear the Avengers theme.
But Liam in the chat brought up in Thor Ragnarok, the immigrant song, how they used that was awesome. It was fantastic. Like that was such a great placement to have as the as that there. It was fantastic to structure it that way.
So sorry to jump in and just talk about that.
No, it's
so great,
perfect.
It's so great.
So kind of continuing on, Rich, in your next year, you have Pro Bowl between Solid Starter and your Hall of Fame. What were the ones you had in your Pro Bowl tier?
All right, so I have 4 in the Pro Bowl tier. I have both of the other Captain Americas, Winter Soldier and Civil War, Black Panther and Doctor Strange. Really, really loved all 4 of those. It doesn't hurt that a couple of those Captain America ones had a lot of scenes shot in Cleveland. Doctor Strange, I really, really liked. I didn't know a ton about. I mean, I kind of knew about him from a comic going into it, but I didn't really get into the comic a lot. Really liked Doctor Strange. Really loved Black Panther. All the tech that was in Black Panther was awesome. So those are my Pro Bowl tier that were just kind of right below my Hall of Fame tier. But I know a lot of people would argue some of those higher, and I don't know that I could really argue against it. They're all really, really good, solid movies.
I'll say from my experience, I did have, oddly, I think Winter Soldier a little bit better as a standalone movie than Civil War, even if I think Civil War had more impact on the overall narrative and story. Like I think it progressed important pieces moving forward, but I actually liked Winter Soldier as its own movie, one of the best out of all 23 is from just a standalone film. I really liked it. And Doctor Strange was, I think, by far my biggest surprise out of the whole thing. Like I didn't get what he was, why he was just being introduced that late in the series. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well done, and I thought Benedict Cumberbatch was perfect for that fall from grace character and rebuild, and the way that he handled that. I was really pleasantly surprised. That was one of my most pleasant surprises. From I had zero concept of what I was walking into, and I thought it was really good as I watched it.
I love the Captain America franchise just because you have a period film. And that's what's so great about the MCU is that there's so many different types of movies in this universe. They're not just all like action blockbusters. You know, you have a period film for Captain America, then you have a spy thriller with Winter Soldier, and then you have what's basically Avengers 2.5 in Civil War. You know, because that really could have been Avengers Civil War when you think about it. I mean, the reason it was probably a Captain America franchise was only because Bucky was so, you know, integral to, you know, the story there. But yeah, I mean, I love Captain America. He's one of my favorite characters. He wasn't, after seeing the first movie, I enjoyed it, but he was like, oh, that's good. But as the storyline went on, I just fell in love with, you know, Chris Evans' portrayal of the character and the character in general. But oddly enough, like Doctor Strange, I don't hate it, but it's one of my lesser favorite ones. I can't even really put my finger on it. I mean, but just, you know, it was good. It was good, but I can't really like say I absolutely loved it.
And I know that was one I saw in the comments was one of the lesser known comics. So most people, even the people who are really into it, said, yeah, I didn't read that one, or I didn't read it till after the movie was announced that it was going to be made, or I didn't even know it existed until after the movie was announced it was being made, and stuff like that. That I got a lot of those kind of comments as I was going through it. So and again, just from a pop culture reference standpoint, you know, obviously I know who Spider-Man is. I know who most of the core of, I know Incredible Hulk, the you know, Iron Man, all the main characters. That, you know, there's only so many that I was introduced to. You know, I didn't know who Black Widow was. I still don't know that I ever heard the word Hawkeye in any of the movies. So I was always a little bit confused in that. Are we just supposed to know who Jeremy Renner is through this whole thing? Because he's a big time actor, so I'm pretty sure you're going to be a thing. But no one ever told me who he was or why he was there. So that was a running.
Nobody ever called him Hawkeye in the movie.
I not that I could recall.
No, he calls his daughter Hawkeye right at the beginning of Endgame, but that's it.
That's a great point. I just people referred to him as that, and especially, like, you know, he's in whatever, he's up in the cherry picker in Thor for 5 minutes, and I'm like, well, that's Jeremy Renner, so they're not paying him to be a 5-minute character, so you're going to be a thing at some point. And then all of a sudden he's an Avenger, and I'm like, oh, okay, you're now a big thing. And it was so weird being like, all right, I'm just going to go with it. And maybe I'm missing some. And at no point was it ever explained of like, why is he a big part of this? And why does everybody just explicitly trust a regular human with a bow and arrow just on par with all these
There's a great SNL skit about that. I think Jeremy Renner was hosting, and they did a whole thing about how he's an Avenger. You're really an Avenger? Wait, you shoot arrows? And then at one point in this skit, he runs out of arrows, and he's like, I'm useless now. Sorry, guys.
It was just, you know, it was fine. Like, he obviously, you know, especially his dark turn at the beginning of Endgame, you know, after he loses his family and stuff like that, was a cool arc to go through and to bring him back from. And then I actually thought
Greg, that's a whole separate alter ego they don't really talk about much, but I mean, the comic fans know him as Ronan. Ronan, actually. But yeah, that's a whole separate.
Do they ever say Ronan or Ronan or whatever?
No,
do they ever say
I don't think they do. No. Yeah. They call him one of the samurai guys he's fighting calls him by a name that starts with an A, and I can't remember what it is. It's in the subtitle, but maybe it stands for that in like Japanese or something, but I don't know.
Yeah, and that was interesting to see. And you know, obviously we'll get to it here in some of the top moments as it happened, but certainly the fight of who got to sacrifice themselves was awesome. Like, that was such an incredible moment between characters like that are, you know, were very cold and calculating through the whole thing, and having it be that like physical manifestation of their version of a touching moment was like perfect. I thought that was so well done in that what would have been a really touching verbal exchange by other characters. I thought that was just absolutely perfect in how they built up their friendship, and it wasn't any of the relationship tension like they had with Hulk or some of the other pieces. It was that just pure friendship, respect, and the two regular humans of the group per se, and how they were able to do that, and then setting up that moment I thought was really cool for B level Avenger characters.
Yeah, it was dope. And then I think the part, I think in Civil War when we got to see Hawkeye's family and how close Romanoff was to his family, we got to kind of see how close they were for real.
Yeah.
So then seeing that whole exchange in Endgame where they were just fighting, trying to sacrifice one another. Yeah, that was touching. That was that was a moment for me right there, a tearjerker right there. That was one of those moments.
So Rich, keeping it moving along, what did you have as your Hall of Fame level?
So Hall of Fame, let's start with, I have 5 in that tier. I already mentioned Iron Man 1. Both of the Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame. I actually have Infinity War 3, Endgame 4 for me. I put Avengers 2, and I think a lot of people probably won't agree with that, but for me, just the scene where you're there on the street and they all kind of are fighting and they come together, and it's that, the kind of the circular camera view of, circling kind of the original or the core Avengers is just something that always stands out to me. So I have that number 2. And then for me, and I'm probably out on a limb on this one, but I absolutely love Guardians of the Galaxy beyond belief. I didn't know anything really about those characters going in. I remember I was on a flight for work coming back from Atlanta. Maybe it had to be LA actually, because it was a longer flight to Cleveland. I was watching on the flight. I didn't even see it in theater. Watching on the flight, and I swear to God, when Groot does the little, the fireflies in the spaceship and then surrounds them, 10 minutes later in the shell and the phone and we are Groot. I shit you not. I started like crying like a freaking girl on this plane, and everyone's looking at me. I'm like, dude, we are Groot, man. We are Groot. And
the CG tree died. Leave me alone.
I mean, I don't know why, but that moment affected me more than any moment in the entire freaking 23 movies. So, and also if you think about it, like I kind of gone back on it, that all those characters have such a direct relationship to Thanos and everything that's going on, more so than anyone else really, until, you get to Infinity War in Endgame. So there's a lot of really important things that happen to set up the, the later movies from a Guardians of the Galaxy perspective. And it's just a fun band of misfits. And I probably relate myself as much to any character like Star-Lord. Out of all of them, I'm probably closest to Star-Lord. So Guardians is my number 1.
That's awesome. I will say, obviously, the final 2, and I still, it's hard for me to put that technically the Spider-Man Far From Home was there as kind of an end cap, and there was a couple nice touching notes to it. The obviously the will down from Tony with the Edith thing, and even the acronym of what he just stood for, and even dead, I'm
the hero.
I'm the hero. Yeah, it's so perfect. And then obviously the scene where Happy sees him on the plane doing the same motions. I thought that was a really nice note, but just the fact, like, it was just so weird. Obviously Infinity War and Endgame are the capstones of the thing. And I think it's the culmination of it. For me, the first Avengers, I think, was my favorite movie of all of them. Like, seeing it all tied together, that 360 screenshot, Rich, of like, just like you said, all of them finally coming together, fighting back to back, all of the alien world coming down around them. That was such a cool moment to see everything tied together. And at that point, you're about at the halfway mark, or maybe the 40% mark of the series. That was such a cool one to be able to see as they started to tie it together and where it was going to go from there.
And Loki's pretty awesome too.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, like, Loki's pretty awesome too. Like, Loki's one of my favorite characters throughout everything, and him acting as the actual bad guy kind of in that, and because he obviously conflicted and goes back and forth. So having Loki be in that first Avengers is pretty awesome.
What were you saying, Del?
I was just saying, I love the right up to that moment with the 360. I love the action buildup of how they're fighting the Chitauri all like in their own ways, and then they all come together as a team. I think that's just that's such a pinnacle moment in the franchise, and the Battle of New York really sets the tone for the next
Everything.
whole portion of the MCU. Yeah.
And I think that I'm kind of scrolling through, looking at a couple of the notes that I made on. I think Rich brought up the We Are Groot. I think that obviously there's several in Endgame and in Infinity War, but some of the other pieces there. I know, Del, you brought it up. One of the underrelated ones was the Yondu arc. I thought was a really underappreciated one to be able to tie him back as the dad figure after the whole, because I don't know why little pieces turn me off the same way as the immaturity kind of threw me off in the Spider-Man. I didn't love the Kurt Russell ego character in Guardians of the Galaxy, and maybe that let me get turned off by Guardians of the Galaxy 2, but as I look back, it was still really good. And then that ending with tying it back in and having him receive the proper burial, and their version of the Viking burial as he got sent off, like that was still really cool.
Guardians 2 is one of my Hall of Fame movies, and it's funny, Rich, you mentioned how the group moment is what was the only moment that made you cry. The Yondu moment was the only one that made me cry in those movies, when he says like he might have been your father but he wasn't your daddy. That was, oh my gosh, if you're a man and like you don't
real
watch the movie and you don't see that moment, it doesn't do something inside of you with your relationship. When you think about your relationship and your dad and all that, James Gunn is just a great filmmaker because he has so much levity, but then he just like, right there at the end of the movie, he just really hits you like, oh my gosh, I thought this was all laughs and you're making me feel something so deep. Great filmmaker.
That was great.
Obviously, I think that they're kind of
so let's stay on that theme for a second, Greg. I mean, I had the group moment. Del, who on my Zoom is below me, Del had the Yondu moment. Ryan, was there any moment for you that stood out, just like, I don't know, maybe didn't make you cry, but like just got you, right? Just hit you in the heart and was like, oh shit.
I think the most obvious one was Tony's death. I think for me, like seeing him unresponsive, and he couldn't say nothing, and just sitting there, like Tony was quiet for the first time in his life, and to see Spider-Man go up to him and saying, "We won, Mr. Stark," and even that moment where he just felt bad about Spider-Man dying, and seeing him and hugging him, and then now he's dying, and and then Pepper coming to him. Pepper been trying to get him to stop and slow down this whole series, this whole this whole thing, and then now she's like, okay, we're gonna be fine. You can rest now, and I think that kind of got to me, seeing him like that. That was my moment for sure. I don't know if I think I kind of expected something big to go down, but I don't think I was expecting this. And then knowing that Doctor Strange knew it was going to happen, that kind of, so that gets to me as well. So it's like, man, he had no other choice.
I have to rant for a quick second.
Yeah, that look, man.
I'm now totally fine that the Bills released LaShawn McCoy. Because I had it didn't matter for me in the moment that he told people that Iron Man died, because like, all right, well, it's a movie, I'm sure people could figure that out. It sucked knowing that was coming. So like the comment from Doctor Strange of, if I tell you it's not going to happen, and I'm like, oh yeah, because you're gonna have to kill yourself to be able to make this happen. That's why he can't tell you. And then he gives him the one finger of, this is the one reality. And oddly, so I think that stopped me from having the normal emotional process where I might have cried in that moment as it happened. But as a father of a daughter who's the exact same age, when he did the I love you 3000, I was done. When he sent the video note back and said, and had the I love you 3000, I was just full waterworks. I was over.
That was a great moment.
the subtle things you just mentioned, Greg, I was going to bring up too, like the Doctor Strange when he looks at him and gives, he's holding up his, he's holding that force field up, right? But he kind of turns that one towards him a little bit, like, yep, no, this is the one moment, man, I was talking about. You got it, this is it. He gave him that. You could see it in Doctor Strange's eyes, and he has to, snap the finger. And yeah, my wife, we watched Endgame together, the same night you did, and my wife now granted she's 7 months pregnant right now with our second, but she was full blown waterwork during the Tony Stark funeral and
Yeah.
Well, and I even like that they built up. I was always curious at which I don't know if it's Iron Man 3 when Pepper gets, 3, where she gets injected with the stuff and then all of a sudden kind of has the suit. And I'm like, all right, how is this going to matter? But setting it up for her to be there with him in the moment, for them to have that moment together that she could be there side by side was totally worth it in that setup. Because that was kind of, just flagged for me in my mind as I was going through. I'm like, why are they making her part of this and forcing the injection of her into that storyline? And then it was awesome to be able to have her there in the moment when it happened.
I always had like a little theory. After Tony snapped, right? There's a moment when Thanos is standing around watching everybody vanish. Couldn't Thanos have ran over to Tony real quick, took the stones back, and snapped all of the Black Order back? Couldn't he have done that?
I kind of I wondered, because obviously they let it linger long enough. Obviously, from a narrative standpoint, you want the gravitas of him seeing all his people disappear. And I think you can justify to yourself that, he's the most powerful being in the universe, so it took a little longer for him to dissolve than the others. But that is funny. He could have tried to run over and undo it real fast.
Because Tony's dying right now. He's weak. So just jump over there to him, get the stones, and you're right back. You're right back in the game, Thanos.
He's probably thinking this movie's already approaching 3 hours, man. I just gotta let this
I gotta get out of this. I gotta wrap it up here. And then obviously,
we didn't talk nearly enough about Thanos, though. By the way, like Thanos was a freaking amazing overall villain.
I love him.
Oh yeah,
he might be my favorite character.
I don't know. I just loved the build up, especially in the last Infinity War and Endgame. They really tied a lot of him together. You didn't see him a ton screen time wise in the earlier movies. A snippet here or there, but I don't know. I thought he was a really great villain who almost had some logic to what he was trying to do. Right, he wasn't just out there trying to destroy things. He was trying to return balance and so on and so forth. And obviously the moment where he showed that he actually loved Gamora was made him something a relatable villain and all that kind of stuff. So I thought he was a really great villain.
Yeah, I think that was perfect. I was going to bring up one of my favorite characters that was forgotten was Killmonger. I thought was such an awesome villain, but was the opposite of Thanos, where it was so all the way one end of the spectrum, over aggressive, all negative, all revenge, all focus on revenge. Whereas even if it was obviously terrible what Thanos is doing, like they actually set it up that there are some people who'd be like, oh yeah, I mean, maybe things would be better if we didn't have overpopulation. You eliminated half of everything, and maybe it would allow everyone to prosper. Like it it's obviously twisted, crazy logic, but they lay it out there of that. He's actually trying to accomplish something, and just happens to be doing it in a horrible way, killing trillions of living things.
You almost empathize with Thanos, and I think for me, Infinity War is my favorite movie because Thanos won. I think that we don't get a lot of movies where the quote unquote bad guy wins, and to see him just wreak havoc from scene one all the way through to the end and win, that was like, I really liked it. And it left me in, that whole movie just left me in shock the way it ended, and I wasn't expecting that. And that's why Thanos is probably my favorite. Him and Tony Stark are my favorite characters out there.
Yeah, he was the protagonist of Infinity War, and he won, and I remember like right after the movie came out, like a month later, there was a Reddit channel, I think it was called Thanos Was Right or something like that. And one day announced, like, at this day, like 50% of all the members of this channel are going to permaban from the channel. And that really happened. So people were joining it just the hopes that they would end up getting like snapped out of the channel or something. That was a fun gimmick.
That's slick. Yeah, whoever thought of that, that's slick.
Yeah. But yeah, he's a great villain. He's not just like some maniac that you can't relate to, you don't understand, and he wants to, like the Joker. Some men just want to watch the world burn. Like he like Thanos had like a logic to him, and he's like, if I'm terrible, I'm terrible. That people think of me that way, but I know what I'm doing is right, because he saw his homeworld. He explains it in Infinity War what happened, and so at least he was a fleshed out character. He wasn't just some big purple bad guy.
Well, and I think that they showed that in that, obviously the stereotypical bad guy is stealing all the money or taking all the stuff and then living, high on the yacht with all the things. And his was living in a hut, picking fruit and just kind of hanging out in simplicity.
Yeah.
That he just wanted peace and balance in things, and that it does give a lot more fleshed out, fully realized character development than your standard just terrible bad guy.
Yeah. The irony is he went to a place by himself. Like, dude, you could have done that anyways and just like forget the rest of the galaxy. Like, I'm good. It's kind of funny. So his heart was in the right place, I guess. I don't want to say that.
Maybe.
I think it was one of you three. Obviously, for me, from a not just an emotional impact standpoint, but from a cool standpoint, besides the 360 shot of the Avengers, the build up and then the moment that I didn't have any concept of, and I truly got to realize in real time watching it, was Captain America getting the hammer. And like they do the little snippet in, I think, Ultron, where Thor sees him budget the tiniest little bit and you see him recognize it, and then they leave it alone from there, and then coming back to it. And they even give you that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, is he going to defeat Thanos by himself? And he gets him for the first 10 seconds of that fight. He has him there. I don't know, I think it was one of you three or somebody in the chain sent me the video clip where it was like the pirated version, but you could hear the audio of the opening night crowd reacting to that. That was so cool to hear everyone seeing it in real time.
I have been to Bills games that have had the same reception way. That's my favorite moment in the entire, MCU is that moment. Thor and Captain America are probably my two favorite characters. I love Tony Stark as well, but like Thor and Captain America I Thor owes that all to Ragnarok, which we've not even talked about this whole time. Yeah, Ragnarok is probably it's in my top 2 or 3 of all the movies. But it's that moment where me, personally, like my 2 favorite characters kind of like came together as one. It's just like I lost my mind in the theater when it happened. Like I'm sure my wife, because I was right next to my wife, I'm sure she looked at me with a severe eye roll. That was so moment I couldn't help it. I flipped out. It was just so great. And then that whole battle with Thanos, that next 5 minutes was just like, not 5 minutes, 5 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever, him just fighting, throwing the shield, throwing the hammer, throwing the hammer off the shield. Just like it was so great. It was like this like gratuitous. And that's what Endgame was. It was just one big fan service. All the fans who had stuck through the previous 22 whatever movies, it was one big fan service, but it was done right. It wasn't like something, it was gratuitous, but it wasn't obnoxious.
I think those are the right terms. And obviously, as different fanhoods come together, you mentioned Star Wars and how that series ended. You talk about, Game of Thrones and the build up there. And I think that's a very similar idea from a scope standpoint. When you talk about, you're talking about 23 movies, all of them 2 hours and change, probably talking about well over 50 to almost 60 hours of total screen time. You're talking about an ever increasing scope, and that's what got Game of Thrones, was that it was just so impossible to tie everything back at the end, that I know some of the things were, abrupt. 3 hours is a long time for a final movie, but I'll say I never looked at my watch or wondered what time it was through all 3 hours. Like I never had that moment of like, oh man, they probably could have cut that scene a little bit shorter. It was all appropriate, so again, not knowing the context from the comics or knowing if they tied off every character story arc in the right way, contextually from the previous text and things like that. I thought that they circled off and closed out all of the loops appropriately from a movie standpoint in how they ended it in Endgame.
Yeah, and circling back to one of Dell's comments, on the hammer when the crowd cheers in the movies, kind of relate this whole conversation back to sports a little bit, right? That's what, I don't know, I think as a fan and as somebody that played some sports in my life, and Ryan, obviously, playing sports still today, God, those moments, in my opinion, are what really makes things special. When, whether it's a movie, whether it's sports, whether it's whatever, you can sit there and like cheer and feel that energy between people in a huge group. Like today, even when I want to like watch sports, I don't watch a playoff game. I'm a Cleveland fan, so I have a lot of heartache and heartbreak, just like all the Buffalo fans, right? So, but when we won that freaking NBA title, in 2016, and I didn't want to be at my house. I didn't want to be, only with 10 people. I wanted to be in a sardine-packed bar in downtown Cleveland where everyone was going completely freaking nuts when something like the Thor hammer thing happens, right? And you feel that energy, and it's just like, F yeah, that's what the payoff is. I'm sure that's why Ryan still, to an extent, why Ryan still plays sports today, getting that feeling, on the field, and not, why we're fans from a sports standpoint. But,
nothing like it.
Oh.
Well, and honestly, the way that people talk about it, the way that the niche world, that everything has turned into super specialized individual, where whatever you're into, you can find somebody who's really into that and talks about it in depth, and there's good quality content for it. What that's done is there are way fewer collective experiences anymore. Like there's never going to be the MASH finale where literally half of America watched the same TV show in the same moment at the same time, and everyone saw that, and it's just kind of gone down from there. And even things that were huge, like the finale for Game of Thrones, like the finale for Sopranos, like the finale for even Friends or Seinfeld or things like that, it's even got harder and harder since then to do that. And things like this, where you're talking about the buildup of 23 movies with what was, I think, now the highest grossing movie in history, or whatever it ended up being, that's one of the, besides sports, like that's one of the few things that are a genuine collective experience now that you can actually do with hundreds of people at the same time. It just, those are fewer and farther between in our world anymore.
We might not get one ever again. I mean, the Game of Thrones, honestly, though, the Game of Thrones arc that happened for years, and, we all can, it's a whole different show. I'm sure we could complain about the way that ended for another 2 hours, but, that arc and this arc, you got to do it in 23 days, but, it was 2008 was the first movie.
12 years.
So,
or 11 years,
12-year journey that some of us took that, I mean, I will never have another 12-year journey where I'm invested in something other than probably the Browns, and they'll just break my heart over and over again. But a 12-year journey, in something, again, I just, because with Netflix and streaming services now, you're just going to get seasons dropped all at one time, right? It's just different.
Yeah, and I forget if it was in one of your threads, Greg, or somebody else I was talking to on Twitter, but with obviously Marvel's making more movies now. There's a Phase 4, and I'm on record, and I'll say it again. If the rest of the Marvel movies are subpar, from this point forward, I don't think they will be. I trust Kevin Feige too much, but like even if they are, like I'm okay. I'm okay with it. Like I walk out of theaters now going, it was all right, because this journey, this saga, we're never going to experience something like it. It's not going to happen. Like you mentioned, there's too many niches, and there's too many different ways to distribute content and for it to be consumed. Like this was something special that happened when, before, the world got even is more, what's the word I'm looking for? Entertainment,
segmented, diverse, or compartmentalized.
Whatever, this is the one thing that's like, and I tweeted about it last night to both of us. They called this the American mythology, basically.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting way to put it.
And this stuff doesn't come along that often. Like it just, the fact that they're lucky enough to have one guy who's basically overseeing the entire thing from start to finish. Really, there's something to be said for that. Like Star Wars wasn't able to pull it off, and I mean, we won't get into too much of a diatribe, but like I'm not happy with the sequel trilogy that just finished up. The retconning of calling everything now the Skywalker saga and whatever. But that's because it was handed off from filmmaker to filmmaker to filmmaker, without one person kind of overseeing everything. and that was part of the problem. Or there was one person who was making the first 6 films, and all he had was yes men around him, and so some of it went kind of sideways towards the end there with the prequel trilogy. But Kevin Feige has done such a great job coordinating all of this. I feel like his name doesn't get mentioned enough. I don't know what kind of Hall of Fame he should be put in. If there's a Hollywood Hall of Fame or a pop culture Hall of Fame, he deserves it. Like, he should be the first, the first entry in whatever that Hall of Fame is.
First ballot, yes.
Yeah, seriously, he is he's created something that no one else has ever made before, maybe never will.
For real. Like, I always find myself I probably watched each movie, I don't know, countless times, but I always find myself going and looking and trying to find different stuff. So I think that's just credit to him of being detailed in each and every movie and having every setup like just playing masterful. So I think Kevin Feige deserves a lot of credit. He's in my Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think you can tell like all the different things that we mentioned about the little setup, the Easter, just having. I feel like I don't think they invented it, but they certainly popularized the term Easter egg. Like, I don't think that was a readily used term for hiding snippets of future coming things. They certainly invented the mid credit and end credit thing. That didn't exist prior to them. That was a trick that they invented to be able to leave those little snippets and things like that. And then to have so many of them weave back in together and to be able to tie so many of them back in, in those spots and have a genuine payoff. And I think that was, whether you talk about Star Wars, whether you talk about Game of Thrones, so many other huge, enormous narrative universes, that was always the frustration was, oh, well, you spent all this time setting up that. How was there no payoff for that? We invested time in this story arc or this narrative. How did that never matter? How did that never be a thing to have it have any payoff for it? And I thought that, again, having the one person with that mind and that thread running through every film for the whole thing certainly showed its value there, to be able to have that overarching structure. And that, you're able to have different directors, you're able to have, like you said, completely different kinds of films. And that if you watched, Captain America, Winter Soldier and Ant-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy and said, oh, all 3 of these fit into the same structure, you'd be like, oh, what do you mean? But as you see it, you're able to find all the different pieces tying together.
Yeah. And the fact he was able to do it in Hollywood, which is a place that is just all about like the bottom line, and it's cutthroat, and there's no, no like alliances or friendships or something, you know what I mean? Like, it's just all about like, well, what does the board think? Or, should we even greenlight this? The fact that he was able to even create a Doctor Strange movie, stuff like that. It's just, it's amazing. And he's been given a blank check from Disney to just, okay, we trust you. You make good stuff. Just keep going with it.
Yeah. Keep making us billions of dollars. Go ahead.
Right.
Well, all right, we're coming up on a little past the hour mark here, so I just want to kind of give each of you guys I want to say thank you. Each of you guys were awesome, and as I was going through this, kind of chiming in and following up on the different comments I was making and supporting what I was going through. So that was awesome to be able to go through there. I know I interact with you guys obviously mostly on the football side of things, or having a personal relationship with Rich, and going through from that standpoint. So one, I want to say thank you for encouraging me to do this and going through there. I had an awesome time. It was totally worth the investment, and I'm glad that I did this. And I now look forward to having some of the popcorn theater experiences to go see some of the other things as they come out. So that'll certainly be cool. I just want to give each of you a minute here to kind of give some final thoughts or some of the things that either something you didn't get to bring up, or just what the overall MCU journey meant to you. So we'll start with you, Ryan, and just, any kind of final closing thoughts of what it was like rewatching some of these, or what it's still like now having Ryan Jr. there, and what it'll be like maybe having him watch some of those, and what this has meant to you and seeing these films.
Well, Ryan Jr. is definitely watching all of them. When he becomes old enough, I feel like this is an important part of history that he must go through, he must learn about. I wanted to bring up something interesting. Like, I don't know if it's true or not, but is it in Star Wars, that whole trilogy, that whole saga, who lost an arm? Like, was it something like somebody lost an arm in that movie, or? Like,
Luke lost a hand, and Anakin lost a lot of limbs.
Yeah, as he became Darth Vader, he lost a whole lot of body parts, and they rebuilt him into Darth Vader.
because I always heard the rumor that in every MCU movie sequel, somebody's lost an arm, or as a nod to that whole saga. And now, like when I look at it, I'm like, okay, Age of Ultron. I think what was his name? Ulysses Claw lost an arm. Thanos lost an arm, and
Bucky.
Bucky. You know, so yeah. So I'm like, okay, I think that like stuff like that is what's like really cool about this whole.
Well, and Rocket's whole obsession with stealing other people's body
Rocket's
parts.
just taking arms,
taking arms, taking eyes.
Yeah, whatever he could get his hands on, just
whatever
stealing
he
other
could get
people's stuff.
And make
he
a
then
weapon.
gave to Thor.
Yeah. So you know, I think for me, this whole 12-year journey, it was fun. You know, I'm anxious to see what's coming out, what's happening next, and how my emotions are going to be moved in the next phases. So I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you know, we find a way to ease this pandemic or cure it or find a solution so we can all get out there and experience it in the movies like it's meant to be experienced. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Appreciate it, man. Dell, how about you?
Yeah, I don't even know what to say. I have so many thoughts that go in so many different directions about this, but I'll just say that I thank you for having me on to talk about this. You know, I know I missed Bill on Twitter and stuff like that, but your
passion comes through here. It's very clear.
But I mean, I love this kind of stuff just as much as I love football. So I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk about it. Just a personal note that nobody cares about, but I don't care. It's my chance I get to share this, so I'm going to share it. One of the reasons I love the MCU so much is because I watched all the movies as they're coming out. Most of them I caught. Some of them I didn't catch, as they were coming out. But before Infinity War came out, probably 6 months before that, maybe a little less, I saw the trailer for it. I was like, holy crap, this is amazing, because I love Guardians and I loved Iron Man. And now that they're all coming together, I'm like, I got to watch this. And so for me, one thing that I just love about the MCU so much is I watched it, but I watched through all of the movies with my oldest daughter. And so like, and my younger one, she watched a bunch of them with us, and she caught up with her mom and stuff. So one thing I love about this so much is that Star Wars is kind of dad's thing that the kids have kind of, like adopted, but the Marvel thing is something that the family shares together. And so that's why I love it so much. And it's so much more than just the great stories and all the funny moments and all the action and everything. But for me, so much of my love for it is tied into the love I have for my family and that we share for these movies. So I think it's great that some giant corporate monster worth billions and billions of dollars can actually put out something that families can share and enjoy together. So I guess that's my thing about it. So it just, for me, it transcends so much more than just explosions and, secret identities.
That's awesome. Rich, what were your closing thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, Dell, you make great points. I've actually, again, my daughter's only 2.5, but she sat down on the floor, and she's kind of she's already kind of a tom girl, to be honest, or tomboy, whatever. She's like a tank. She runs in a wall, doesn't care. But I was watching Infinity War in my basement, kind of by myself the other day, and she kind of wanders down, and it's Infinity War can get kind of intense in some of those fight scenes. She just kind of sat down with me, and all of a sudden she started. I shit you not, she started mimicking Spider-Man. It was in the is one of the the fight scenes or whatever, or it would have been Endgame. Actually, it was the Endgame. It was the last scene of Endgame. Spider-Man's running with Thor's, or with the gauntlet, with all the stones, and he's passing it off to Black Panther and all that. And she sits there and starts she starts doing this, and I didn't tell her to do that. She starts mimicking it, right? So now, like for the last 5 days, she's been like running around, playing superhero, jumping off things onto me and shooting spider webs, and it's freaking amazing. So I already bought her the Spider-Man thing because everything's printed and stuff. So I'm like, yeah, Spider-Man. So obviously it's kind of the same page of what Dell just said there. It's more than just the movies, but just the journey. I talked about it in my whole crowd feel good moment, a few minutes ago. The journey was amazing. And it's just cool to like get invested in something. Like I talked to my wife, and she tends to kind of just, she won't get completely invested in a book. She'll get invested in a book, but like stories, music, or movies, she sometimes doesn't get invested. I'm like, get invested. Like block everything else out, concentrate on the movie, concentrate on the music, feel the music, go to live music, you know. So like being invested in a story for so long, I really get into that kind of stuff, and it was just a great journey. So, you know, and along Ryan's comments, you know, I hope everything can return to normal, you know, soon as well. So if anyone's out there that's listening, that's a first responder. My wife's an ICU nurse, so you know, thank you for everything you're doing out there, trying to get us back on track here. And good luck to the Bills this year.
Yeah.
Hopefully the Bills and Browns have a big playoff matchup, and good luck to Ryan. You know, with everything you got going on still in the football world, and you know, hope everything turns out successful to you, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys. I had the same kind of experience. It was, you know, kind of going through, and it's different when you get to do it all compacted. So binging it was very intense, and being able to experience all the things there. And I know some people, you know, as the next movie would come out, you would rewatch it to kind of refresh. And I had everything running like very fresh in my mind as I went through the whole thing. So it was always fun, like kind of picking out individual pieces of characters and things like that, and seeing that, you know, just enjoying some of the little snippets and the, you know, laughing about Fat Thor and being able to see the different characters kind of rise and fall, and like you said, tying into personal experiences and how different things would hit you, like the Yondu experience or like the I Love You 3000, and just tying that back to each of your personal experiences, your family members, your other things like that. That's cool. And exactly what Rich said, just being able to lose yourself for a minute, in that there's so many other real, you know, stresses and serious situations going on around us. It's nice to just turn your mind off for a minute and just lose yourself in the story. And this was cool to be able to do that for almost a whole month of going through and just kind of losing myself in there with so many other very real things happening all throughout every day, and being able to just get to that point at night. All right, the kids are in bed, everything's kind of calmed down. I get to just turn my brain off for a minute and just experience the story. And it was cool to go through all of that and be able to experience it. So thank you guys very, very much. Appreciate you guys who came in the chat here and listened to us put this together. I am going to put it out on my normal podcast feed and everything. I'll just warn everybody, hey, this is some non-Bills content, but jump on in and enjoy it. So Ryan, Del, Rich, thank you guys. This was awesome. It was so much fun to be able to do. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Really
Appreciate it, Greg.
Man.